Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the Cemetery Board. My name is Dan Shapiro. I'm Rosanna Rosada's chair, designated chair.
Paul Ambrose, representing Commissioner Howard Zucker of the New York State Department of Health.
And my name is Christopher Wiles, and I represent the Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman.
Louis Polishuk, Director, Division of Cemeteries.
Chester Buckowitz, Assistant Director, Division of Cemeteries.
Sealman, Senior Investigator, Division of Cemeteries.
Glenn Breen, Investigator, Division of Cemeteries.
Onay McAdoo, Secretary, Cemeteries.
Tony Melillo, Counsel to the Cemetery Board.
Welcome, everybody. So, minutes of the last meeting. Have folks had an opportunity to review?
Yes.
Any comments, suggestions? Wow. Not even for you, Tony?
That's 2 meetings in a row.
Nope.
That's amazing. All right. Well,
Nay.
No, sure. He did the one before, didn't he?
No, we had nothing on the one before either.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
but he wasn't here. No,
No, he was.
I just have a minor typo, that's all.
Ah, we do it.
I
Okay.
feel better now.
Okay.
We'll do it as how. Yeah, just a minute. Okay, cool. So,
I will move to accept the minutes of the meeting of September 27th.
Second?
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Provide that. Great. All right. Mr. Melillo, legislation and regulation.
Well, I think the only thing with regard to regulation is with the passage of the new law permitting the interment of pet cremated remains, we're seeing the need for regulation. So it's probably something we'll be working on shortly. I'm sure Lewis is going to report that they're working on an FAQ, and that's kind of led us to realize that we're going to need regulations over and above that.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Polishuk.
We're working on an FAQ.
We're working on
We
FAQs.
hope to issue it. I think it's realistic to say we will issue it by the end of next week. That's at least our goal. We're internally at the division level all but done. The idea is that the new statute is not exact on interment of pet cremated remains is not exactly self-explanatory. We've gotten a lot of questions, and we want to try to really just give guidance and flag issues for cemeteries to think about rather than necessarily prescribing things, since we wouldn't prescribe things via a memo or an FAQ anyway.
Right. And I correct me if I'm wrong. A cemetery would have to amend its rules and regulations just to get-go, all right, in order to accommodate pet burial, chose to afford it. So that those rules and regulations would come to us for approval, as they always do. So that's sort of a stop-go issue.
And if they want to charge, which they're specifically authorized to do, interment of pet cremated remains is a service charge, and they're going to have to establish a fee.
All right.
So
So
also our review.
So hopefully cemetery corps aren't willy-nilly starting to allow pet burials without doing those things. So that getting the FAQ out sooner rather than later would be a great thing, as we all know.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay.
Other than that, the NISAC Regional is coming up on Wednesday at in Oneonta. Our investigator and accountant for the region will attend. Should our FAQ be done in public by then, we will talk about that there. Should it not be done by then, we won't.
Okay. All right.
And the cremation certification course is happening a week from today at apparently a new and improved location. When the public has to speak, I'll let them say where it is, since I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll wait for that then. Anything else, Louis?
That's pretty much it.
That's a record for you. You really do want to get out early. Okay.
No, I want to move on to our next subject
Oh,
Vandalism.
and get these guys out of here.
vandalism?
No, yes, well, that too.
All right, so vandalism, we've got three applications pending.
Did you want to do a report? Did you want to hear?
I wanted, what was this report? I'm sorry.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. For the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2017, vandalism fees collected so far $72,845. Applications granted total $687,183. applications pending, total $239,511.
And just to, as y'all already know, this is more for the folks out there in TV land. Two things about the fees collected. Number one, they do tend to come in when cemeteries submit their annual reports, so that will go up significantly in January and February. But number two, for the last few years, the fees we have taken in have been significantly less than the money we've paid out.
Mhm. All right. Going on to the applications, we've got 3 pending for dangerous monuments. I saw one which I had a comment on, not an objection to, which is Mount Calvary Cemetery. Apparently there's a large monument that's very precarious. And it's true that if a monument falls, nobody's under it, then it's no longer a dangerous monument. Notwithstanding having observed the danger, I think we have to take care of it. And so what's happened here is Mount Calvary, I think wisely, has made an application for relief now without necessarily going through the precursors, and that is the advertising, because the money is dangerous. They'll take care of everything they need to take care of, but there is a need for speed. And we all understand that, but I thought I'd point that out. Any questions, comments, concerns on any of these?
No.
Motion, maybe?
I will move to approve the 3 pending applications for hazardous monument repair.
That's great. Second, Paul?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good stuff. And now, for the single item on our public agenda, which is Pearl River.
I'm going to get the cemetery on the line. Please let me not misdial.
Did you take a look at them?
I have it, yeah.
They're all super technical. But,
Oh, you
I think
have
I
changes?
misdialed.
I didn't
Hang
know.
on.
Oh, Gary emailed it.
Oh, okay.
I'll let you.
Hang on 1 second. I just want to double check the number for their attorney. I think I mentally transposed 2 phone numbers. Oh, great. I can't get one.
I think the afternoon meeting time is throwing us off.
Did you see this?
For 2015.
I did transpose numbers.
Really? I did not see that.
What is it?
Paul has a question he will ask regarding Pearl River. I printed out.
David Englander.
Hi, David. Louis Polishuk. I've got the entire state cemetery board and a bunch of guests, and you
That's
are...
great. Let me put you on speakerphone. Give me 1 moment.
Sure.
Who are we talking with?
Attorney for the cemetery.
How are you?
Hello. So, but just to let you know, you are being recorded and broadcast live to our thousands of viewers out there in TV land.
All right. Well, we actually wish that we could have been there. Our circumstances didn't permit it, but we're well represented over here. We have it's myself, Rudy Hansen, and Eileen Rogers are here with me, and we're actually expecting the cemetery historian to show up momentarily. That's Robert Knight, who wrote the book that I think I gave you a copy of, Louis. But we're ready to speak on behalf of our application, and we appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you guys.
So, do you want me to do any form of presentation, Dan, or have you guys got it?
No, I would.
I think. I mean,
No, hold on. I'm talking to the board.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You guys hold off unless I tell you to say something, or Dan does.
Hi there, by the way. Dan Shapiro,
Dan.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
That's great.
Very well.
And could you
Happy New Year,
identify
everybody.
yourself for the record?
I'm David Englander. I'm the attorney for the applicant here, the Pearl River Cemetery, and I'll let the other members of the committee of the Pearl River Cemetery identify themselves.
Great.
Rudy Hanson, General Manager.
Eileen Rogers, Secretary.
That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for participating in this. We've all read the voluminous backup for your application, and we're somewhat conversant. But I'd like the division to give us its précis and perspective, and then we'll probably be asking some questions of you.
So essentially, the division's view is this is a cemetery that should be, and arguably has been, under our jurisdiction since the division was created. It's not entirely, it's lost in the mysteries of time. I forget what the expression is, as to how the division identified public cemeteries in 1949 when it came into existence. But this one has, since pretty much exactly that time, operated as a public cemetery. They've had a board, they've had interments, they've had charges. There's no restriction on who's getting interred there. It's been a volunteer, not-for-profit type board during that period. The current group has been much more active. We've been to the cemetery several times. It's frankly better. It is frankly on the better maintained side of the cemeteries we see that are under our jurisdiction. The recent records are very good, and I think they know where everyone's buried, which is always important. They know where their available land is. The cemetery also has a columbarium, which they built themselves, which they have plenty of spots left in. The cemetery essentially has minimal expenses and minimal income, but has been able to operate profitably in I think all but 1 year in the last 15, based on donations from their volunteers, which, again, they have a very consistent record of getting donations from the local community that have tided them over. Otherwise, even excluding the donations, we feel that with a modest increase in their lot fee, which is frankly quite low for Rockland County, they will be able, going forward, to just about break even without little one side or the other, without donations. And with the donations, they'll be making money. And we would recommend, as part of getting off the ground, that at least 25% of sales be put into permanent maintenance, because right now they have a fund that they treat as essentially being permanent maintenance, which has got about, I'm going to speak in approximate number. I mean, I have the actual numbers here, but it's approximately $8,000 in restricted funds and what, 78 grand, something like that, in unrestricted funds. We'd obviously want the balance to shift the other way.
95, I think they have 9,500 in PM and 74,000 in general.
Right. Okay. So it's relatively close.
Yeah.
So they we'd want them to build up that PM, obviously, which we think they could do with at least 25% of funds going into PM. With that plus an increase should allow them to still break even on operations.
That's notwithstanding any lack of donations, you're saying. The donations have typically, or at least in the past few years, exceeded revenue from activities and sales.
Right. We have a projection here that shows without donations. We show them making minimal money every year. But there's absolutely
something that's missing, though.
What's missing?
You don't show money going into PM. You don't show administrative fees. You don't show money's going to the vandalism fund.
Okay, so you're missing. So what we're missing is the. I don't think you're right about administration, but but you're probably right that we're not showing here the vandalism and assessment. I mean,
and the PM fund.
And right,
that's the big one. I mean,
hold on. Our aggregate, before we did the year projection, Vince Gimondo did an aggregate projection of what they would make over the life of the cemetery. That shows them building up the PM fund. We're not showing that on an annual basis. That's correct.
Right.
But the bottom line is, we see absolutely no reason to think that their donation base is going to change at all. They've got a track record of soliciting these donations, and we think they're going to keep doing it.
Well,
Really,
hold on, we can direct those questions, some of those questions
to the extent there are questions. The only wrinkle
There are questions.
The only wrinkle that we saw, which there's been a lot of back and forth about, is the fact that strictly speaking, the board, strictly speaking, the cemetery doesn't exist as a legal entity, and the board, that's why we're here, and their board does not own the land. The town is prepared. The town has indicated, both by its attorney, that it's prepared to convey the land to the cemetery, taking the position that title to the land has vested in the town under the town law section 291.
Title or a right to use the cemetery as a cemetery until such time it's no longer used as such. I think that's the argument. But in any event,
Okay.
which is fine.
Were they going to do a regular deed or a quick?
I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're only prepared to do a quit claim deed.
I think they're prepared to do a quick claim with a reference to sections 291 and 292 as the authority for both, or the basis for their for the establishment of their interest in the cemetery, and 292 for the authority of their right to transfer it to a duly constituted not-for-profit. So it's those two sections read together that is the authority for what's being contemplated.
Right. I know there's been a significant discussion here and research done on this, and the answer is probably still as clear as mud. However, I at least I personally think that there is support for the proposition that the town has the authority was vested with the authority to use it as a cemetery until such time as it isn't, and to the extent that they can, it may get you over the hump.
Right.
But my concern with this application, this is why I wanted the division to chat with us first, is that we have the issue of abandoned cemeteries. All right, we have the issue that this cemetery hasn't contributed to the fund for X number of decades, and we have the possibility that the town may have to take the cemetery one day, and it would be a public policy problem for the board to consent to the formation of a new Article 15 cemetery when the town would be taking it over within a couple of years and asking for a couple $100,000 or whatever it is to run it.
Well, let me
Or
hold on.
$30,000. Let me talk to Louis. All right. So the posture of this is that I think that the obligation of the board, if in fact we agree that this transaction can take place, is to assure ourselves that the cemetery will be viable, all right, for a period of time that is acceptable, so that there'll be no possibility, no reasonable possibility of a town takeover within a short period of time. So that's the issue. That's the issue I wanted the division to address, which you've somewhat addressed.
Well, there's a piece that there's a piece that was missing.
Wait.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, you have addressed my question, but I did want to follow up on one thing.
Yep.
If we're not incorporated, the town wouldn't have to take it over?
If we're not in court, well, then you go to 291, and what the obligations of the town are for an abandoned use in a different sense.
I've had lengthy discussions with Mr. Englander about what is the proper view of what the current status of the cemetery is. There's the three different sections of Town Law 291, and whether any of them apply to the cemetery and which of them is a very open discussion. And it's important because out of the three provisions, only one of them says the town gets title when it takes over one of these cemeteries. So if it's under the other two, the town has the responsibility to care but doesn't have the title. So we're not certain what the status of this cemetery is, which is one of the reasons why the town wants to do a quick claim, because they don't know if they ever got title.
Right.
So there's some facts that I left out that I think are important.
Can I just add one more?
Yeah, sure.
Because you're focused on a financial issue, and I want to bring one more issue, a financial issue. There are legal issues too that I want to discuss, but the other financial issue is the vandalism fund. It's existed since 1988. They haven't been paying into the vandalism fund. Now, if they're one of ours, they're going to be able to withdraw from the vandalism fund. Hold on. We've been in discussion with another cemetery run by a religious corporation that wants to release it and let the cemetery become one of ours. And one of the impositions we were going to impose on that was, wait a minute, if that's going to happen, you have to have a fund set up so that if there's vandalism or dangerous monuments, you're going to use that fund before you come to the state. And this is kind of in a similar posture, but I don't see that issue being addressed in the papers. That, from day one, they're going to be able to come and seek vandalism funds rather than have a set of funds that they use first before coming to the state.
Well, there's another possibility there, just taking these a couple at a time. One possibility would be to determine the number of interments they've had since 1988, figure out what the sum that they would have been paying in, had they been paying in, and have them pay that in. And then there would be no issue about them withdrawing vandalism funds. That's number one. Number two thing, the uses of state funds that a cemetery would be entitled to would be vandalism. Of course, one can never rule out vandalism, but correct me if I'm wrong, David, there's no history of this cemetery actually having been vandalized in anyone's recent memory.
I believe that is correct.
Rudy?
I'm looking at my committee members, and I'm getting nods to the head that there is no history of vandalism. So, I mean, in terms of its track record, it would be a fund that would be untouched at this point.
The second place where state money might come into play would be repair of dangerous monuments. We've been in the cemetery several times. Quite frankly, we did not see any. Now, did we push and test every single monument in the cemetery? No, but it's a small enough place, and the monuments appear to be in good shape. Many of them are of a nature that they would not qualify as dangerous even if they were leaning or askew or off their foundations, simply because they're not high or thick enough. So that's the second use. The third would be on abandonment funds. As of now, the cemetery is well maintained, and there would not be. I would not, if this cemetery were ours and it were to be abandoned to the town tomorrow, I would not be prepared to recommend approval of any abandonment funds to clean up the cemetery on the grounds that it doesn't need cleaning up.
So here's
now,
what I'd like to address.
Conceivably, the town could ask for certain equipment that they don't own that would be used to maintain the cemetery. That's the only thing I could think of that they would have a current claim on us now.
So, an unlikely scenario, 3 years down the road, the cemetery is now, the board of directors gets upset, leaves the cemetery, it's uncared for, monuments fall down, trees get overgrown. 5 years from now, town comes to us and wants 50 grand, 100 grand to take care of it. All right, could happen. So what I'm asking you, what I'd like you to address, is can you project a life expectancy for this cemetery, or at least a period of time where the division can vouch for it and say, you know what, this cemetery on its projected course is not going under for any particular number of years. Can you say this cemetery will be viable for 10 years?
Financially speaking, yes.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the current volunteer group running the cemetery,
No,
I have no idea.
I'm not asking you for that, but I'm asking you for operations based upon the division's expertise. Is this cemetery a viable cemetery, and is it reasonable to expect that it will be continuing for decades?
We have a solid 15-year track record to go on, so I'd be comfortable projecting out at least that far. But again, there's no way of speaking to
address that, because I asked for, when I was looking at this before it came to the board, I asked for a 15-year analysis. I don't know that that's in the board packet.
It is actually.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the,
Yeah.
It's actually.
The backwards as well as forwards?
Actually, it goes beyond 15.
No, but the going back part.
Oh, going back. I'm sorry. No.
Yeah, no, there's a projection, but there's
Oh,
there's not a
okay.
There's
look back of
actual
50.
financial
Oh, okay.
data. We
All
did
right. My
have that.
apologies, yeah.
The aggregate of that data is what went into Vince's report.
Right. But there were years, I mean, just 2009, they operated a loss. 2008, they operated a loss. And this is with donated funds. So they show the last 4 years, but if you go back just a couple of years beyond the last 4 years, the prior 4 years, there were deficits even with the donations. And the donations were up and down. They only have the donations for the last 4 years, 2,000, 5,000, 5,000, 3,000, and change. So one of the problems with the projections is it shows steady growth in the donations. So I think the donation aspect is unreliable. I think the board should be looking at the other line that shows what the income would be without the donations.
Right. And at least according to what we were presented with from 2015 on, I think it was, they operated in the black even without donations. A black by
Right.
$1 or $2, but in the black.
Right.
Which is heartening, you know, and I think that was part of Mr. Polishuk's presentation.
Right.
Why don't we, well, before I turn it over to chat with the secretary, any more conversation we want with the?
Paul, you had a question on the financials, didn't you?
Yeah, on the treasurer's report, under expenses, it shows no insurance cost for 2015.
David, if I remember right, the reason the insurance isn't shown for 2015 was am I remembering this right, that they paid 2 years of insurance in 2014? You notice how the insurance is double in 2014 and 0 in 2015? I remember asking you guys this, and I think the answer I recall was that there was a bill that got paid in January of 14 and a bill that got paid in December of 14.
I guess we'd have to confirm that. I don't have a firm answer as we speak now.
Because I remember, now that Paul brings that up, I remember asking that very question, and that's what I recall as
Okay.
the answer.
It makes sense.
Okay.
You look at,
But I'd have to go back so far in my email that I'm not going to find it.
Well, we'll find it for you.
Because the number looks about right.
they paid, oh, yeah.
I want to indicate that based upon the circumstances when.
Hang on there. Wait, David. They're still chatting about the insurance. Give him a second.
Yeah, it appears that, I mean, look, the facts support your remembrance, Louis.
No, but I remember
But
asking him about
What that
this.
would mean is that the bottom line, if you were doing just projections, it would be
Slightly
skewed.
better even in 2014 and slightly worse in 2015.
Yeah, that's what it means. All right.
Sorry, David. Go ahead.
I was just going to indicate that you know, and I'm sure the board is aware that the revenues over the last number of years have not taken into account the actual promotion for the sales of gravesites, basically pending you know, this application that's now before the board. We in a certain sense, other than the maintenance and the expense side and the solicitation of donations, we've not been promoting what we look to be in business to promote, and that is the sale of gravesites. So we've been without the revenues from sales for any number of years, and we have every reason, we believe, to believe that those sales will put us pretty firmly in the black
Right.
going forward.
That's something I omitted to highlight. For the last 18 months, they've been doing interments at need. I think they've had a couple of sales at need, but people who are not existing lot owners or family of existing lot owners, they've just been taking a reservation list until their legal status is resolved.
Right, so have you not, I haven't got the chart in front of me, have you not sold graves, for instance, for the last couple of years?
That's correct.
You've not sold any of them?
No, I thought you guys had sold.
There may have been one or two that was sort of, you know, in negotiation, and I'm not sure.
Rudy, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought there were one or two where there were family members that already had lots, and you agreed to sell them an additional grave.
We have family plots which will have burials in. The new graves, we will not put in a new grave unless there's going to be an interment. And we won't put the interment in unless we're compensated.
All right.
So in cases where people have to be buried, they are buried. Normally, I've got a waiting list. People that are just pending.
How many folks on the waiting list?
Going to come due this month.
How many folks have you got in the waiting list?
I'm sorry?
How many on the waiting list? That's it. That would be good information for us.
I have at least 8 families.
8.
One family is 3 people. Sometimes there's 2. At least 8 to 10 grave sales.
And I would just add that that's with the public understanding, and it generally, it's out there that for the moment we're not selling grave sites.
Right, because prior to this hold, if you will, I think your average grave sales, including niches, was something like 3 or 4 a year. Is that right?
That's about right.
Okay, but you would anticipate you have a significant backlog. Let's say, for discussion's sake, I don't know, 15 or 20 graves.
At least 15.
Okay, and you anticipate generating more than 3 or other than that, generating more than 3 or 4 sales a year.
The answer is yes, but we're not out looking for sales. We're a community cemetery, and we've only told the directors in Pearl River that we exist. We don't go out to the county and solicit. And one reason is we don't charge that much, and people would flood us, and we don't want to be flooded.
But speaking to that point, I have discussed with Rudy and with the committee here that we understand the concerns of the board with respect to both the pricing of the grave sites as well as the funding of the permanent maintenance fund, and we understand the discussion now with the vandalism fund, and we're certainly ready to accommodate and to address those concerns fully, and to establish those funds out of the operating funds that we have separately.
I think the division projected in their papers an appropriate permanent maintenance fund of $150,000 to support the cemetery. Obviously, that's not attainable immediately. A significant chunk could be put in, but you would have to take special efforts to rebuild the fund. Which, if we get to that point, we'll discuss how to do that.
Right, but I mean, we're also, I would certainly be, if the board thinks it's more of a priority to segregate monies for vandalism or dangerous monuments for what they haven't paid in the period when they were not where they were not recognized as being under our jurisdiction, and thinks that should be prioritized over putting that money into PM, I don't really have a problem with that.
We'll chat about that in the future. Any other questions now? Before I turn it over to Tony, because I can see Tony's lips are pursed. That means he really wants to get into it.
Oh, there's so much. Okay, all right. So one of the confusing things about this cemetery is its legal formation. It's been operated as an association since 2010. Then they made the mistake of incorporating it as a for-profit corporation. I mean, Lewis made the point of saying the cemetery doesn't exist as a legal entity. I think he meant as a legal corporate entity.
Right.
That act of incorporating as a for-profit was a nullity. So in essence, it's still an association. So let me get to the nuts and bolts issues of...
Although it's been an association since sometime in the early 50s.
Right.
I think 1952.
So I don't know if the cemetery has taken the steps required for an unincorporated association to incorporate, which is in Section 1505D. It requires 3 lot owners may cause to be a notice posted in conspicuous places. It requires a meeting, it requires votes of lot owners. I don't know if that procedure has been followed. Has it?
No, that procedure, you and I, am I talking to Tony?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Hi, David.
Yeah. Hi, how are you?
Good.
We talked about that, and, I think I had proposed that actually when we were talking about another cemetery situation, and again here, and I know you had some doubts as to that manner of incorporation. I anticipated actually proceeding by looking to get the approval of the board for the formation of a not-for-profit, and then the acquisition of the property through 292 of the town law, rather than through 1505D, which seemed in some ways a strained operation, and I'm not sure it's occurred before. But so the answer to your question, the short answer is no.
But you could do that, but David, there's no reason you guys couldn't do that. I mean, between your board members, you have enough lot owners that you could go ahead and do that.
We certainly could do it that way. That's for sure.
So just to make clear,
it's not clear to me whether we would still be looking to the cemetery board for approval for formation, and for, with assuming jurisdiction over our operations.
just to
That
be
seems to hang out there as a question. I'm not sure how the board would feel about that.
So I think, all right, just to be clear, 1505D isn't permissive, it's required. If you are a cemetery association and you want to convert into an incorporation, you have to take these steps, and these steps are preliminary to filing your certificate of incorporation.
Right, in no event can a not-for-profit Article 15 cemetery be formed without the consent of the cemetery board. So, I agree with your analysis, but it seems like, as Lewis was saying, this is probably for this cemetery a ministerial thing, but in any event, it's good to point it out. Okay.
So that's one issue.
But I mean, the other thing, and just in terms of order of operations, is if you guys were not going to approve it, making them go through that just so to come back. No, I'm thinking of the next, because I have another one of these that's coming for next month,
Lewis?
and I want to understand, like, order-wise, to me, getting the board's conditional approval makes sense.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Unless we don't come to a conclusion today, but we're going to try.
Right.
All right. So that's one issue. Another nuts and bolts issue is 1506C, which deals with cemeteries in a number of counties, including Rockland County. And it's with the approval you need from Rockland County before you can proceed. And I don't know if that has happened.
No, not. We wouldn't anticipate even proceeding with that, I guess, until we knew that we were going to have board approval.
Tony, do they need to do that? They're they're already a cemetery. This isn't the creation of a new cemetery.
A cemetery corporation shall not take by deed, devise, or otherwise land. You want them to take land.
So the conveyance triggers that, even though it's already a cemetery. The county legislature will say yes.
Okay, I'm sure they will. But these are just steps that have to occur before the board can say, yes, we approve this incorporation, yes, we approve this certificate of incorporation.
Right.
So that puts, if they're seeking a sense of the board, I think that's certainly appropriate, that the board give its sense so that they can know that they should go forward or not. But the board should not, at this time, be approving the formation of the corporation or the certificate of incorporation.
Okay. It makes sense.
Right.
And you certainly want to belt and suspender this one if, in fact, we think it ought to be approved.
Conditional.
Well, I think you may have to do a conditional approval to get the town to do what it needs to do. The county will probably do it.
I don't think the town can legally convey a deed to a corporation that hasn't filed its certificate of incorporation. So I don't think the town can convey the property until everything is done, including the last step of...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right, but a conditional approval means
The
that
county
hasn't happened yet, anyway. But, all right, we'll discuss that as,
All right.
let's continue on the merits.
All right, so then there's the more abstract issues. Those are the nuts and bolts issues. The more abstract issues is what is the status, what we were talking about, of this cemetery under Town Law 291. And it is unclear. And one possibility is that this is actually a cemetery that the town has been obligated to take care of, but it hasn't, and the cemetery association's been doing it even though under Town Law 291 the town should have. So it's in this weird posture of the possibility of the town giving up a cemetery that it has responsibility for to a public cemetery corporation that we approve the formation of, and then the possibility of that same cemetery going back to the town, but now the town has the availability to go for abandonment funds, which it couldn't under the present posture. It would have that obligation to maintain it with its own funds. So that's a more abstract issue than the nuts and bolts straight out of the law manual
And
issue.
it is that there is an alternative argument
Right.
about title, or quasi, I'll call it quasi-title with respect to the operation of the cemetery.
Right.
And as I said, I think you'll agree, I think it's clear as mud. It really is.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to come to
I personally,
conclusion.
I don't believe, all right, so just to summarize one more time, those three awful provisions in Town Law 291. The first provision deals with what I've come to refer to as untitled land. A cemetery has been run as a town cemetery. They don't know who's got title. The town has the obligation to take care of that cemetery, and it gets title to the cemetery. The second one is where it's been run as a town cemetery, but they know who owns it. It's owned by private people. The town gets the obligation to clean up that cemetery, but it doesn't get title. And then the third one is the one we refer to as the abandonment of our public cemeteries. Now, in this case, title was known. There was a family that
Title
had
was known
title.
at some point.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's known now.
Right, but title was known at some point. And that family set up the cemetery and set aside some of their land to be operated as a cemetery. And that's a dedication of land. They didn't have to convey title to make that dedication take effect. The dedication itself authorizes the operation of a cemetery on their land. And once they do that, they can't take away that dedication. As long as the cemetery is being operated on that land, it has to stay a cemetery. Unless all the bodies are removed, then that land goes back to the rights in that land goes back to the landowners. Now, I don't think anyone's ever followed the chain of title, as Lewis has indicated, to see who the current owners are based on all the succession.
No, I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you essentially determined that on at least 2/3 of the ownership, you couldn't do that. It was simply impossible to track all the
Well, I mean, it
descendants.
was beyond, I mean, it was the descendants of two families, two private owners, two individuals, going back, for the turn of the century, who, and they owned as tenants in common, and it's the descendants of them, and we're probably 3 or 4 generations removed at this point. So the process of determining who were the distributees of the Schultz and the Fisher family going back that far was just an impossibility.
Assuming the Schultzes were not bought out again by the Fishers, because the Schultzes seem to have vanished from the picture at some point.
Yeah, I think that is the case. We have, the process of tracing those families would be legion. And I guess I read some of the Solicitor General's opinions as saying that this 14-year period that's referenced in 291 of the town law was intended to wipe out the reversionary rights in situations like this, and to provide that the title then vest in the town. And there's actually another recent, not so recent, but more recent than some of the ones I have been looking at, a 2012 Solicitor General decision that seemed to say that pretty clearly. And you recognize the ability at that point for the conveyance by the town to a duly constituted not-for-profit approved by the board to accept title.
And the other thing is,
So the reason I bring it up is the town is absolutely correct. If I was the town's corporation counsel, I would say quick claim deed. You don't know if you've got this or not. But the point for us is, at the end of that transaction, we don't know if the cemetery has title or not, because we don't know if the town ever acquired title through all this. Title could just be, but title isn't an essential element. The essential element is the dedication of the land. Once that dedication occurs, that land is cemetery land. And whether they're operating it under title or operating just through the dedication, I think probably is not significant beyond just an abstract question.
There's a 1946 opinion of the state controller which says precisely that. So, there you go.
It's wonderful. So those are.
so where does that leave us?
And then there's the financial issues, which I think you guys have.
Financial is that the town could come back
Right.
and ask for money.
Yeah. That.
I mean,
if it's theirs now, they
Of course,
obviously could not.
The flip side of that, though, is that if for some reason you guys were to say no, then the volunteers are
Yeah.
left at best in legal limbo, and responsibility for the cemetery, I think, to the extent anyone is responsible, it would fall directly on the town right now, without further ado.
Who may well not do as good a job. I mean, that's the other side of this. It's a public policy, but very up close and personal kind of public policy, in the sense that the division is vouching for it, and the cemetery is here. You have a cemetery which is well run, according to the division, that is probably in better shape than most of our small cemeteries, and that has a seemingly enthusiastic board who wishes to continue to run it. That's a good thing. So that's just balancing. This is the way I'm working it out. It's balancing the potential that the town will acquire the cemeteries and abandon the cemetery and then hit up the fund for money within a short period of time. And that's why I pursued the questions and why I want the division to be dead sure that, in fact, this cemetery is not going to go under 5 years. I guess you can't guarantee to a certainty anything.
Mr.
But
Chairman,
yes.
Could we condition our approval that the town cannot come back for money for a 10-year period?
I wouldn't mind doing it if we had a legal vehicle to bind the town.
I think it would be, if you start going down that road with the town might start demanding that you not go down that road as a condition of their granting the quitclaim deed that we've asked them for and had to spend months arguing for them to issue in the first place.
But Tony said that's really not important.
Well, if we don't need it from the town, that's great, because the best thing that we could get from the town is to not have to deal with them.
Yeah, but we still would have to
It took
bind.
us months with them to get to this.
But you'd still have to bind the town. Just because we say it, don't make it so.
Well, the town's not going to assert that it wants to run the thing if the volunteers are running it.
I understand that.
So
I think I like it. I like it. I don't know that we could make it happen.
I understand
Yeah.
that too.
And the other thing is that
the other possibility would be to figure out how they should have paid into the vandalism fund as a public cemetery by then and have them segregate the money.
yeah, it's a few $100.
Right, that's something.
3 barrels a year since 1988. What the heck is
Right, they could easily. Right, they could easily 3 times 35.
But that's not the issue. But that's not the. But Louis.
But it is the issue.
No, it's not.
Because,
The issue.
no, because if they were one of our.
No, it's not. They're a cemetery operating outside of the article now, and it takes an affirmative act of the board to make them a cemetery and to provide access to the funds. So no, we're custodians of the funds, and we have to pay attention to that. Right. So, but anyway, I'm still very interested to hear what the fiscal projections are of the cemetery, because if we can walk away from this table thinking this cemetery is going to be going for 10, 15, 20 years, all right, and if we're confident of that, then I think that mitigates the issue dramatically. So that's what I really want to hear. So, Mr. Englander, have you heard this discourse?
I have.
Rudy, how many names do you have on your waiting list?
We went through that already, Louis.
How many?
We got it.
Exactly.
15, it's 15 graves.
And how many?
15 graves,
How many
I
of
think.
those are graves, and how many of those are niches?
All graves.
So if they raise their price, that's 15 times 1,300.
I think the proposal, or rather the recommendation, as I understood it, the board was looking for. I think the current price, which is under market, is $1,000, and we're looking to raise it to $1,300 or higher, and we're good with that. I mean, we understand that we've been under market, and we're absolutely prepared to sell the graves at full market value, and again to make the appropriate transfers from the operating funds into the permanent maintenance fund, and to establish an appropriate vandalism fund.
Is there anything else the board should know with respect to future projections of sales and of donations that would be of value to us? Your revenue-making capacity for the next 10, 15 years, any projections you can make?
There was one projection that I thought was pretty good. Vince came up with it. He said, I'm using too much of my space in roadways. For the size of the cemetery, I don't need the perimeter road going around. I could take that road out, and that'd be all additional graves.
Right.
That's new to our discussions, and we hadn't thought of it. He thought of it. It hasn't come before our board yet for their discussion, but that would add a lot of graves.
Which is, I think, another. I mean, obvious two things. That obviously doesn't necessarily increase their annual sales, although having differently located graves might help, but it would increase the life of the cemetery.
Yeah,
But wait, there's a number two here. The number two here is that only came about through our involvement. They're benefiting from having our oversight and technical assistance. If they go to the town, they don't have that.
You've got a cheerleader here, Mr. Ringleter. You should be very happy.
Let me just say this at this moment. We've been at this for 2 years, and if nothing else, I want to express our appreciation to the director's office, to his staff, and to the board, really, for bearing with us as we try to work this out, because this is an important cemetery for this particular village. It's been in existence and it's served the community for a long time, and we're dedicated to try to figure out a way to make this work, and we've had nothing but the cooperation of the director's office. So yes, I've had a cheerleader, and I very much appreciate it.
That's great. That's great.
What were you going to say, Mr. Chair?
I forgot. But, I guess I mean, sense of the board, how does the board feel about the fiscal viability? If the board, do you agree that if we're assured that this cemetery, if we're convinced the cemetery's got a significant lifespan, that we're in favor of doing what we can to bring it into the fold?
Yes. I agree.
Fair enough? All right, so...
Can I just make one further comment? The cemetery's been in existence, I believe, for some 200 years.
Right.
That the committee that we're talking about has been in existence from, I believe, 1952 on. The operations of that committee, they meet, I'm not sure how many, 3 or 4 times a year. There are meticulous minutes that have been kept with regard to its operations. It's all volunteer. It's certainly the committee is going to be around for the next 10 or 15 years. They've demonstrated their perseverance, and I believe that one way or another they're going to make the cemetery work. And again, we appreciate the board's working with us and guiding us with regard to its proper operation. So
The cemetery, look, the division fully supports your version of the cemetery's operation and the care that's been provided to it, and that it's an asset to the community. And you do deserve, as Paul points out to me, our commendation for that. I mean, so, but that being said, we're back to the fiscal viability of the cemetery. So, Louis, I'm going to have you one more time. All right. The division thinks the cemetery is going to be a viable concern for at least
I'm pretty, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm pretty confident over the next 10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, they do have the space with the roadways. They have 15 sales backed up. That's significant. How much space, how many more niches have they got?
300 and, what is it?
300 graves, about 500 niches.
541, right.
Okay. So
that's without closing the roadways.
All right.
That's without the roadways.
Okay.
300 graves?
Yes.
Is the
we had wrong information in the original report. I thought we corrected it.
All right.
Do we do anything about the vandalism fund?
Yeah, oh yeah, we haven't gotten to the conditions.
Okay.
All right. Are we satisfied?
Yes.
At least to get over the hump that we can support this? Are we at that point?
I think, I'm concerned about what Tony has brought up, but if we're satisfied that it's legal for us to do this, then, I come down on one side. If there are reasons why we should be concerned, then I think those need to be sorted out before we make a decision.
That's a great comment, and Tony, you can chime in after I chime in. I said in the beginning, it's about as clear as mud. I think that Mr. Englander has pointed out arguments that are certainly in favor of the, ability of the town to convey this, whatever it has. I think, there's no explicit vehicle that you can really point to at law other than by interpretation, and there's precious little interpretation of this stuff. That's the world that we live in. But Tony's point, I thought, was really on the mark, and that is, look, this has been dedicated, it's consecrated ground, it's dedicated cemetery, and uniform in all the literature, the common law, is that you can't divest that dedication until the bodies are gone. So this is going to be a cemetery. I don't care who owns it, or owns it, runs it, whatever, until it's really not. And that resolves the issue to me. Then public policy takes over. In a sense, we're shaping common law a little bit because we're taking an action here that I don't know that it's been contemplated before. Or if it has, it's just been done without comment.
Probably any number of these transactions occurred in the early 50s when the division came into existence, and we just don't have a record of how it happened.
I'm sure that's true.
I think it's a good idea to take the deed despite what I said.
Yeah.
They may require evidence of ownership if they want to take a bank loan. They may be asked to give easements to utilities and things like that. So taking the quitclaim deed is not a bad idea.
The deed is belt and suspenders.
Yeah.
Whatever the town owns, whatever that is, whatever right it has, it goes over. And and we've discussed that, and it's sufficient for me anyway, but then again, what do I know? Well, that's good. So now let's discuss. We've had some important issues raised with respect to the abandonment fund. We've had important issues raised with respect to permanent maintenance fund. I think the division had proposed a plan for the permanent maintenance fund to be accreted, and we've talked about vandalism. If we were to calculate the contributions to the vandalism fund that were to be made since 1988, I don't know why I picked that year.
When the vandalism fund came
that's
into
1988.
existence.
See, you're the man. All right.
Because you said the year 1988,
I did.
actually, to be precise.
Wow. Okay. Since 1988, if it's 3 burials or 3 interments a year or whatever, that's a number, and then it's a small number. It's under a few $1,000s, whatever it is. So it's sort of de minimis, but why don't we do that?
Now, is it your preference that they pay it to us, or to segregate it?
I would put it in a segregated fund.
Then they keep it.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. No, why don't they?
That would be my preference. Would be for them to keep it and segregate it. But if you want to pay it to us, I'm okay with that too. I don't feel strongly.
Is there any?
I think segregating it, the accountants can note in their records that this is a dedicated fund that can only be used for this purpose, and that it gets spent down before they apply for vandalism funds. I think the division can track that much better than.
It's under $3,000. Anyway.
Yeah, I said it's a relatively small sum. Now, with respect to
Because
what to me is
us
more-
processing that payment might actually be a problem.
I think so too. But what is more important to me is the permanent maintenance fund. And so I know you had proposed bringing it up by transferring
50 grand.
to 50 grand.
And then putting 25% of all sales into PM.
20
Honestly, prospectively. With all due respect to the board,
Yeah.
this is the kind of thing we do on a regular basis. I know you guys probably don't like us saying trust us.
I don't
don't
trust, but the board has to have a sense of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it.
I would think we would want that for now as a minimum, but really I'd want, once this is done, for Vinny and Alicia to get really granular with the numbers and also maybe give them the possibility of, as this fund, let's say sales take off like crazy. We could scale back the amount of money that goes into PM. Alternatively, we could increase it. We could look at, let's say their expenses went up and they needed to put less into PM. It would be better that it not be under board order, that we could simply adjust it. As of right now, I want them to transfer 50 grand and put aside at least 25% of all new sales.
Let me ask you, because I know the division has done this analysis of how much it would cost to run this cemetery if it stopped earning money. And so how much would it have to have in the PM fund? Is that analysis in here?
Again, it is in Vince's memo. It's a pretty
What's the
rough
number?
analysis.
It was 150.
It was 140, I think.
Oh.
It's a rough analysis, though. It's based on just generating
the
what
50,000
3% would pay for expenses.
And with the 50,000 you're proposing that they put into the PM, what will the PM fund be up to?
It would be up to 58,000.
Yeah.
58,000. So you've got another
Got a long way to go.
80,000.
Yes.
So the additional contributions continue until.
I don't see them reducing
I don't
it
see
any
it ever
time.
goes down,
right?
right? I mean,
but
it's probably got to take the life of the cemetery to get up to where it needs to be.
The reason I raise this is that we have a bunch of cemeteries that are under board order from like the early 50s to put, and sometimes even court order, to put in very large numbers into PM. And the reasons, this many years out, the reasons for those orders have become moot or even unknowable. And we're left administering something where we have absolutely no idea why the board came up with it. I'd much rather do this based on
So I understand the desire and the need.
Just because every time I see one of these, I scratch my head.
An easy way to deal with that right now would be for the board to put an initial contribution to reach the 50,000, to reach the segregated funds for vandalism, etc., and then to defer or delegate to the division the responsibility to oversee the continued health of the cemetery and the accretion to the funds by whatever means they wanted to do it.
That's fine. I mean, you could even put in there that you initially wanted at 25%, subject to our discretion to increase or decrease.
At that point, it's yours.
And I've already spoken to these folks on the phone, and they're totally fine with the higher contribution, raising their prices, and transferring the money to PM. $3,000 into a segregated fund for vandalism shouldn't present much of an issue.
Can I interject just one bit?
Sure.
A lot of it is nomenclature in the accounts, what we call them and what you call them. You're asking us to put in 50 into an account. We really think we have 64 in there right now because we call on our money market account. So it was nomenclature that we didn't agree on what to call these things. Vince gave me the form to fill out for our financial report. So we're willing to change the name of our accounts to meet the financial requirements that you're asking for, which really is the stroke of the pen, and with the board's recommendation to change it, we'll do it.
Well, yeah, the permanent maintenance fund's inviolable and can't be accessed without the blessing of the court. and our blessing.
Understand that.
Right, I just want to make sure, okay, so you understand
Rudy, to
what
the
it is.
extent your concern is that you'd have to sell something to transfer the funds, you could always.
No, we don't.
We could address
we
that.
have no CDs right now.
Okay.
CDs were a bad market, and we actually stopped investing because of the legal status we're in.
Right.
Okay, so that's
Almost 2 years sitting interest, no interest.
right. So you can move the money around and then invest
It's
it
just a
appropriately.
stroke of the pen.
Okay, fair enough.
All
And
right.
if it has to be dedicated, then we'll make that into a trust fund. That's easy.
Okay, so before, no motions or anything, for a sense of the board, does it sound like a plan to you? Yes. So here's the question, Tony, I'm gonna address this to you. Is there any reason or should we be doing a conditional approval?
I don't think
Or do
so.
we wanna wait, all right? Does the town, Mr. Englander, do you think the town will want something from us, in order to?
I think, I guess I do. I mean, I'm just trying to understand a little bit of some parts of the discussion that were, I wasn't grasping entirely. A conditional approval would simply allow the town to approve the transfer of the property, but we.
Actually, I sort of screwed it up. Let me, before we go further down that path, I really wasn't, I said the town, but I was really referring to 1505D and 1506C, which are the precursors that you have to go through in order to make this ripe for board consideration of your certificate of incorporation. All right?
Which is, you're speaking now of 3 plot owners raising their hands and forming the not-for-profit?
And the Rockland County approval. So I misspoke when I said town, but I don't know if Rockland County.
I think the
want
county
anything.
legislature will want something from you guys.
Okay, but
Give them the minutes.
if I can, is there not a mechanism by which we could form a not-for-profit with the approval of the board, simply for purposes of receiving the quitclaim deed, and not go through the process of 1505D. I'm not quite sure. I guess that kind of got past me. Why 1505D would be required under these circumstances if the board would approve of a
It's not a one or the other, David. It's both have to be met.
I think
1505D has to precede board approval.
I think what Mr. Englander is being too judicious to say is that when you guys approved Palisades Cemetery 2 years ago, we did not have demonstrated compliance with 1505D.
That's exactly correct.
We didn't know.
Was that a?
It was
Is that
the
an
only
association?
difference with that. There was a committee. I don't know that there was a formal association that had been operating it all along, but there was I forget what they were called. They had a committee. And
Yeah, I don't
the
remember
only
the specs.
difference there was that we knew who the landowner was, and the landowner was conveying title in a clear manner to the cemetery.
I suspect, listen, we're all humans, I suspect we just overlooked 1505D.
But
All right.
compliance with 1505D is not going to be burdensome
No,
for
it's
that.
not.
That's easy.
And it's belt and suspenders, and I think it'd be a good thing to do.
But to the extent we deem county approval to be necessary,
Well, that may really be necessary.
they're
That one
going
I don't
to,
think it's
they're
a whole lot
going
of
to
wiggle
need
room.
something in writing from you guys, or from us saying that you guys approved it, or are
Well,
on
not
board
approve
in
the
some
certificate of
form.
incorporation, that we're going to approve the certificate upon receipt of those precursors.
Which, to me, is a conditional approval.
So would it be fair for the minutes to reflect
Yeah.
that the board is in favor of the incorporation of this cemetery pending compliance with the legal requirements and pending compliance with the conditions that have been discussed?
Yes, it would be. And the reason I like that is because we have a couple things. You need to sit down, division, with Mr. Ringlander and figure out how the funds are going to work, because it sounds there's a little unclarity there.
No, I
I mean,
think-
it's certainly going to be fine.
I think we're clear.
But and the other thing is, we do have some very technical questions for your certificate of incorporation. which we
Yes,
can,
certainly.
which unfortunately we just effectuated them today. But we'll send that back to you, and that way you'll have no problems once we get it submitted and approved for a filing with the Division of Corporations. I ran it by our corporation counsel there just to get his take on it, so he's made some amendments for you.
But that, again,
Okay.
that's not,
Again, but technically, we don't have a certificate in front of us, we'd have to, yeah.
I understand, but just from my own understanding, can we get some guidance a little bit as to how the steps of getting of complying with 1505D in terms of the sequence with, in other words, the board's going to sign off on a certificate of incorporation, but we're going to go through the process of 15.
no, you're going to do the 1505D process, report back to us that you've done it, report back to us that the county has approved the cemetery, and then the board will physically, the way it works is the board physically sits here and signs the certificate of incorporation.
Yep.
I see, and then we get the deed from the town.
Right, but then
Yep.
you will have minutes in hand. You will have today's minutes in hand evidencing the board's support for the project, which should be all you need to take to the county.
The county understands that the board has given a tentative approval.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
We have to sign this?
We have one question from Rudy Hanson. Bear with me one second. Yeah.
Not a lawyer, but I read that piece about the county. I had it interpreted in my mind that was for new cemeteries in Rockland, Orange, or Sullivan counties, not existing ones.
I just would add to what Rudy said. That was the impression that the town supervisor also understood when he looked at the statute. So, I just add that as well.
You will be a new cemetery corporation. I think, if the county has a different opinion and they think you don't need their consent, they can let you know. But
Okay.
my look at the statute is you're a new corporation, you're taking land by deed. The statute requires that county's approval.
I think what Rudy was saying though is that the concerns under the statute are that the dedication of new land for cemetery
Right.
purposes, and since this is
Right.
an established cemetery, that consent is not required. But I guess in the technical or broader reading of the statute, it may be that's not.
If the county feels that it's not required and doesn't want to do it, if they just pen a little note and say, you already got it, that's fine, that's certainly sufficient for us.
If I remember right, David, you got this with respect to Palisades, even though it was already an existing cemetery. Because I remember discussing that when Palisades came in.
I don't know that we ever got something in writing. I got information from the county just saying, we don't know what you're talking about, and we're not.
That might be good enough.
Don't bother us.
That might be good enough.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for being here. That was a good
I want to
discussion.
thank you for being there.
So, David, I can call you tomorrow. We can just review the 1505D steps. Frankly, I don't think it's a big deal.
Right.
Perfect.
And then Vinny and Alicia and I will crunch the numbers and we'll give you specific guidance on that.
Right. So when it comes up to us
Great.
again, it'll be a lot shorter discussion, like about 30
Hopefully
seconds.
it'll just be, you'll present the documents and sign.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
We'll verify that the
Thank you
documents
very
are there
much.
and then you'll sign.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
All right, take care now. Thanks again.
Right, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Man, am I glad I didn't have Cooper on this month.
That was a good discussion. All right. Well, I thought it was going to be a half-hour meeting, fool that I was. In any event, we are now at that point where the public agenda is done, and I'd like to open this up for comments from anybody who'd like to address the board.
Okay,
I will.
Yeah, oh, there you go.
Just following up on what Louis was saying, to meet the increase in the number of folks for the cremation certification class, the class was moved to the Comfort Inn and Suites at 16 Wolf Road. And we look forward to an excellent program. Appreciate the oversight of the division and the board. For clarification purposes on the pet issue, obviously this has garnered a lot of attention and significant calls to not just the Division of Cemeteries, but other branches of government, and certainly to our office, a number of calls to our office. Based on what I heard, is it my understanding that the board will not be approving any changes in regulations and fees to a cemetery, for a cemetery, until regulations are promulgated?
No.
Okay. I just want to be very clear.
Actually, let me be clear,
this
so
is a
folks,
serious
because folks understand,
concern.
folks watch the meeting and everything. So I just want to. My point in mentioning that was that what we have determined, and what makes sense, of course, is that a cemetery must amend its rules and regulations to permit that. That those rules and regulations have to be approved by us, and that a price, if they choose to charge for the lot, has to be approved by us or filed with us. And that in itself would prevent a cemetery from just going ahead. And I know what you've been saying. You've been saying all the right things, as we have, but there may be cemeteries out there that aren't in communication, don't understand that in fact they need to do those things, may start permitting pet burials, and may really get themselves into trouble, not with us necessarily, but with their own lot holders. All right, if they don't make it understood what's going on, and if they don't take the right precautions. So I want that out there. We are going to be issuing, the division will be issuing FAQs, which provide a roadmap, answer a lot of questions being asked on a daily basis. And I think that will provide a lot of guidance to cemeteries, so they have an appreciation of what should be in the rules and regulations. All right, and whether they can charge. They're very basic questions. There's very basic questions that need to be answered. So we're attempting to do that.
The FAQ is really going to be more in the nature of one of the division's bulletins, but we're phrasing it as an FAQ because we want to make it easily intelligible to small volunteer-run cemeteries.
Now, I believe at this point that there is a need for rules and regulations for purposes of clarification, although I also believe that we can, by reviewing rules and regulations, approve what clearly comports with statute. All right, so that's the way we're proceeding. We're going to be doing rules and regulations for clarification, but we're going to be approving rules and regulations as they come in if they are appropriate for the task.
And we're expecting the FAQ.
My goal is the end of next week.
Okay. So, and the reason for me to make this comment, as the board, well, some of the board members may know, we did share guidance from NISAC that we had drafted through our Government Legal Affairs Committee. My concern, based on what you were saying, Mr. Chairman, is it's not falling on deaf ears in the cemetery industry. Nature abhors a vacuum. This statute took effect immediately. Mm-hmm. And, literally the day it was in the newspaper, cemeteries were getting folks showing up at their door with folks who were inquiring about their pets. Yep. So this is a concern of ours, that we get out information that's correct and, the division and the board are comfortable with as quickly as possible, because this is causing some concern for our members about giving the right information. And there are cemeteries who have already drafted their rules and regulations and prices and are ready to submit them. And I don't want to hold them up.
Well, you may want to hold them up, but the worst we can do is...
The FAQ might help them with drafting those rules and regs. One of the issues, just so you know, why we think regs are going to be necessary.
Because we share this information.
We'll share them with you too when we...
But one of the issues is, what do you do with multiple lot owners? Whose consents do you want to buy the right to inter pets? Whose consent do you need to say, I want this pet in? And whose consent do you need if there's a decision to remove the remains? So multiple lot owners is something that really, I think we're going to have to address by rule. There are other things, but that's just the one that leapt out at us as we were considering the FAQ. And until there are regs, maybe cemeteries might want to address that in their own rules. until we do have regs, on, what's the procedure that they're gonna follow to avoid disputes.
We're hoping to have guidance available shortly, and then we'll.
Well, and to follow up, obviously, the association stands ready to work with the division and the board. We want to do something that makes sense and get it done as quickly as possible so that we can address this. And obviously, the purpose of it was to, increase some revenue to cemeteries. So we don't want to stand in the way of preventing this, so we don't have more abandonments before you. Thank you.
Yep, sure. You're welcome. Anybody else today? All right. Do we have any reason to go into?
No.
We don't.
I got two things.
Oh, we do? Okay. So
Okay.
in that case.
Just set a date.
Oh,
Let's
yes,
set a date
always.
first.
How's the third Thursday next month look? Or is that too, wait, that's the old one. What do we do?
Could
What do
we
we
go
do for
with
the
the
new?
second?
Scheduled for the 9th right now.
What day is that? Hold on a second.
Wednesday the 9th was the date it was scheduled.
Wednesday the 9th? That look good, guys?
Yeah, can we do a morning?
I never want to do afternoon again. I'm not on my game in the afternoon.
I'm okay on Wednesday.
Okay,
What's
Wednesday
Paul?
9th,
You okay?
10:30.
Wednesday 9th, 10:30?
Yeah.
Sounds great.
That's the weather shoot, that's not the calendar. That's the calendar.
All right. That being said, I will move to go into executive session for investigative and litigative matters. Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.